Hey everyone, it's Laura with DNAngels. Like the new haircut? I do. So listen, it's my turn to tell a client story. And I've been sitting on this story for a while because, truthfully, I made a mistake. Let's dive in. So I had a donor-conceived person come to me who wanted to identify their donor. They had just found out within a few months that they were donor-conceived. Their mom used IUI to conceive. She grew up in a family, a two-parent household, but she never knew she was donor-conceived. And when she took a DNA test, she matched with, I think, 6 donor siblings. Well, here's how the mistake happened. I call it demographic or geographic bias. I let the location of the solution interfere with the investigation. So I break down the DNA into 2 networks, as we do, grandma and grandpa. You don't know who's grandma and who's grandpa until you get the 2 great-grandparents identified, 2 sets of great-grandparents identified, and then you merge them together, right? But in this case, one line was clear. The other line was almost non-existent. They were recent immigrants from Germany. So what I had to do was process of elimination, right? So the great-grandparents that I identified had 5 kids. 3 of them had DNA matches under their lines, which could allow me to eliminate them as potential grandparents. That left 2. Now, under these 2 kids that had no representation of DNA, there were 2 boys, one for this line, one for this line. Well, one line, and both of them, by the way, both of their parents had married a German immigrant. So I'm like, it could be either or, right? Because they both are going to be descendants of that German line. But one line was in California and one line was in Pennsylvania. Well, I was looking for someone who had donated fresh gamete in Pennsylvania because the client was born prior to the invention of frozen gamete. So anybody who was born prior to this date was always going to have fresh samples for the mothers to be inseminated with. And so that meant that the man had to be on site or very close by. So when I looked at both lines, I saw one line in California, never in Pennsylvania, right? And then another line that was in Pennsylvania had always been in Pennsylvania and was at Ground Central. So I told the client, I said, look, I can identify one set of great-grandparents, and I know that your donor is the son of either this line or this line. But I feel strongly it's going to be under this line. But I'm going to put a big disclaimer. I gave her an asterisk and a disclaimer. It could be here, but I see no evidence that this man was ever in Pennsylvania. So let's come on over here. I'm going to give you contact information for this man. I'm going to tell you all about his incredible parents and what you descend from if this man is your dad. I'd like for you to reach out to him and ask if he donated sperm at your clinic. So she did that. She took several months to come back to me and say he has never responded. What is the next step? I said, she said, can I reach out to his sister? I said, I think that would be absolutely fine. You know, we're just asking questions. So she did reach out to the sister, and the client has named her Hurricane Naomi because Hurricane Naomi is very passive aggressive. She starts out slow and supportive, and then she kind of comes back and whiplashes with gaslighting my client for, what's your intentions for reaching out? Is this a scam? You've been led astray by the people that are trying to help you. My brother never donated any gamete, nor did my father, which we never accused her father of doing. We knew it was one of 2 men, her brother or the cousin. And so once we were very clear from Hurricane Naomi that her brother was not a donor, we looked at the other man, and he actually did fit a donor profile much better because he was a doctor. And her brother wasn't, but he was an engineer. And so, listen, if you've been in my shoes for any amount of time, a donor can be anybody, right? They can have any kind of job in the world. They can be a janitor. I've ran into all kinds of situations. Everybody wants to say donors are doctors, and it's just simply not true. Donors really run the gamut of industries. Although I will say a lot of them are doctors, a lot of them are attorneys, a lot of them are researchers or scientists. He did fit that mold as an engineer. So we just made our way past Hurricane Naomi, who, by the way, was in the background notifying all the cousins that someone's out there and someone's donor conceived, and accusing her family and her brother of being a donor, which we simply did not, nor did my client. By the way, my client's a psychiatrist, so I mean, she's not uneducated. She knows how to hold a conversation. And when she was showing me the conversation that she was having with Hurricane Naomi, it was very well thought out and processed. She was very cautious about the information, but Hurricane Naomi was demanding like names. Who are your DNA matches, so I can contact them and let them know, that by putting their DNA out there, they've created this issue with my family. And by the way, Hurricane Naomi's father was a reverend, and she used a lot of things like "I will pray for you" and things like that. And it really set us on a bad tone. And I felt terrible because even though I put the disclaimer in there, it was my mistake, because the donor did end up being Hurricane Naomi's first cousin. And so my client reached out to that first cousin, who did come back and say he was in fact a donor. He did not know if he was her donor, because he demanded to know who took a DNA test as well. I just don't get it. Even though we gave them plenty of evidence as to why we have identified their line as the line of interest, they still were very demanding about wanting to know. We were able to get past it without providing the DNA matches, because that is private, and we're not going to share who the DNA matches are. If you want to know, take a DNA test and see who the matches are yourself. But I feel like that is private information, and we shouldn't share that. It's a fine line of ethics here, and I'm sure that you agree that we shouldn't have, shared the information of someone whose permission we didn't have to share that they had taken a DNA test and showed up as a match at Ancestry. However, I will have to do this in a part 2, because I want to really share some of the conversation that went on between my client, psychiatrist, and her donor dad, who is a medical professional. It will absolutely floor you. And I can't put it in one video, because I really need to sit here and read and have a conversation with you about the words going back and forth. And so I'm going to do a part 2, and I'll try and wrap it up in part 2. Okay? So we'll just do two episodes of this. But can you imagine, I'm just going to leave you with a little cliffhanger. Can you imagine finding out a couple months ago that your donor conceived, and being able to eventually make contact with your donor, and he reduces you to a financial transaction during medical school? That's all he wanted. He just needed money to get through medical school, because he didn't want to incur any debt. Oh, and by the way, he donated for 9 months a year while he was in school, once or twice a week, at 60% efficiency. So he knows that over 60% of the donations that he made were successful, and he is speculating himself that she should probably have 50 or more siblings, but he just needed the money. Good luck to you. There's a whole lot to unwrap in this, and I'll be back with more.